Okay, Chavro, it's good to see everybody. For those listening on Spotify, Apple Music, or any other platform, welcome. A good Erev Yom Tif for all those that are listening in, and to those live. Good Erev Yom Tif to you too. Baruch Hashem, Shavuos is coming at such a beautiful time for us and for Klal Yisrael. Every single year it comes as we enter the summer after a long winter. For those of us that have experienced a long winter, and for those that have not, it's a continuation of good things in that regard. But besides that, it also ends up being a really opportune time for us to reconnect to ourselves and to what Torah means to us. And they say that on Rosh Hashanah it's Yom Hadin for Gashmias, and on Shavuos it's Yom Hadin for Ruchnias. And when you think about Yom Hadin for Ruchnias, you think to yourself, on Rosh Hashanah I get judged for how I behave and ultimately the effect that it has, but it's categorized as all of those things so that in the Olam HaAsiyah, the world of action, we're in a position where we are trying to redeem ourselves and have a meaningful year in the upcoming year in a way that was different than years prior. When it comes to the Olam HaEmes of our Ruchnias and our connection and our deep wanting and need for fulfillment, Shavuos gives us that opportune moment. And for those that are heavy in the Panemius Chasidus mindset throughout the year and growing in that world, we know that there's all sorts of things going on in the Ilamus during any meaningful time of year for the Yidden, whether it's Shabbos, whether it's Yom Tovim, whether it's Rosh Chodesh, whether it's davening, whether it's anything. There are things happening in the world that we don't see. There are things happening in the spiritual realms that we don't see. And what's going on in Shemayim during Shavuos is a very, very big deal. And there's a lot of connection to Keser, there's a lot of connection to Das, there's a lot of connection to Meichen, there's a tremendous amount of spirituality that is happening. And if we go into Shavuos with the intention of knowing and connecting to the fact that while we're seeing this, behind it, behind the retina, in the upside down for those fans of Stranger Things, there's a whole nother thing going on. And we can impact that, and we can reconnect with that, and we can have the ability and the opportunity to kind of break down our ruchnias in a way that allows us to really try to compartmentalize where we're at and where we're going. And one of the things for the Yom Hadin of Ruchni, which is Shavuos, is radical and transparent honesty with ourselves as we go into the Yontif, and where ultimately we need work as it relates to how we connect to Torah and how we connect to mitzvahs. We've all heard the line, the living Torah. The living Torah. Torah for us can either be something on a shelf, or Torah for us can be something that we're actionable with. Torah can be something that we learn. Torah can be something that we live. Torah can be something that we actively are conscious with. Torah can be something that we're not conscious with. We can go to shul and not be conscious. We can go to shul and be conscious. We can go to learn and be conscious. We can go to learn and not be conscious. And the reasons why we are not conscious, like we've talked about, is because the Olam Hagashmi has us engulfed where the Olam Haruchni is being swallowed up. Shavuos may be an opportune time for us to really understand how we can flip the script. So I'm going to be giving a chavura for the first night of Shavuos, and the conversation that we're going to have is going to be about this flipping of the script. How do we get enlightened through Torah? And when I say enlightened, I mean truly illuminated internally, but also that the backpack comes off, the backpack of Gashmias comes off, we truly get lighter, and we can walk around in an easier, softer way in our lives and in our day by connecting to a higher consciousness, by connecting to a world that is more spiritual. So I'm not going to go through examples for this Chabura because we're going to jump into the Sefer, but it has to do with what we're about to jump into. For Avishai Lev, where I need to be radically honest with myself, is the love-hate relationship I have with Talmud Bavli, with Gemara. The difficulty in my thinking and the level of consciousness and presence of mind I need to learn a piece of Gemara is probably more than most, just because I don't have that gene. I used to consider me, as something being stupid. And, that's still very possible. I also know that it's, I also know that it's a grind for certain people, me being one of them. And so when I look at my Olam HaRuchni as things that I need to assess, I can easily just write off Gemara. I can write off parts of Torah that I don't, connect with as deeply. Or I can go inward. And so I did. I've gone inward the last couple of years. I've spoken to Rabbanim. I've spoken to people of influence in my life. I've spoken to friends that are big learners of Gemara. I've spoken to Chevrei Daf Yomi. I've spoken to Chevrei Kinyan Masechta. I've spoken to Chevrei Araisa. And I've tried every single one of those at some point. And I think I finally have a better understanding, which we're going to talk about in a moment in the Sefer, of why Gemara for me has been fleeting. As an individual who's trying to unpack life as it comes and unpack past stuff in my life, for right or for wrong, I've always needed to have an emotional connection to the individual, to the subject matter, to the job, to the effort, to the volunteerism, to the tefillah, to the rav, in a way that is meaningful, or I have a very hard time staying put, or being present, or being available, or being emotionally attached to anything that I just don't really understand how I'm supposed to relate to this. You layer on top of that Gemara is a hard thing intellectually at times to kind of put the pieces together, and you're a very literal guy, like I am, I'm very organized, and I'm a big, they say a lot of people on Alcoholics Anonymous, they love task lists. They love to check things off. There's a dopamine hit that we get from just checking things off. And so I'm just very like that. I got to check things off the box, and anything that disrupts me, and I've had to work on that behavior. But when it comes to Gemara, where it's got no real order or flow in the traditional sense, I realized how difficult it is for me to stay connected to it. But really, 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 let me go more inward. So really, 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 what's the tachlis? And then let's jump in. Tachlis is that I've always looked at Gemara as I'm supposed to read everything and feel something. I'm supposed to go into the Gemara and I'm supposed to instantly feel something that will keep me grabbed on so that I can continue to see it through. We all know that some of the most meaningful things in our lives are the things that we don't feel good about, but we have to do anyways, working out, going to work, volunteering our time, being parents, being husbands, being wives, all of those things. They're not easy all the time. They are challenging at times, and yet we have to push through it, and we find a way to do it, even though we would rather be doing something else in many of those cases. So the vort that I was given for years is just push through it. But that didn't work. Eventually, I'm now 40, and it didn't work. It just never, that wasn't the answer for me. I couldn't just push through, because on the other side of it, there has to be some hana. Everyone that I know that's learning Gemara, except Gedolim, they're learning it lishma, but they're also learning it because they get a geschmack from the learning. There's something in it for them. But when someone finally said to me the following line, it really began to open up my eyes. If you're a Panemius guy and you get your chiyas from godliness, from trying to connect to Elokus in a way that is deep and meaningful, to imbibe Elokus in your day-to-day life, to include Hashem in the things that you're doing, whether it's brachas on food. Actually, I just said make a bracha. Or it's brachas on Shechianu, or it's meetings you're about to have, or it's meditation and mindfulness, or it's Talmud Torah in general. Wouldn't it make more sense to understand how God thinks to a degree? What Hashem's level of thinking is? Obviously, we can't really comprehend how God thinks. But the Gemara was given to us to give us a intellectual pathway to that level, to that line of thinking. This is how Hashem created our magnum opus that we are supposed to understand and work on in all of Klal Yisrael 2026 that is of something in learning is obviously learning Gemara as a main thing. So instead of it being kanak until you feel something, what if it's not kanak until you feel something? And what if it's something less than that, but more than that for an individual? It's not about the knocking, but it's about the connecting in a way to realize that I would love to get closer to Hashem through understanding how He wants us to digest His version of thinking and for us to be able to connect to that. And now when I'm learning Gemara, the lens in which I'm seeing the words through is not just random letters on a page, but it's kaviyachol, it's imagining how the Eibishter is, intellectualizing halacha and debate and thought and deep wisdom and all the things that Gemara offers that a more straightforward, straight-laced task list may not be able to accomplish. So that's something I'm working on. That's something I'm going into Shavuos on. I'm really trying to stay with my Gemara little by little. Kinyan Masechta, a couple lines a day. I'm really, really trying to stick to it. And I'm having an easier time because I'm not trying to kanak. I don't have to like it because I'm learning to intellectualize it as far as and connect my neshama to it as far as how Hashem thinks, so I can think kaviyachol along a similar lens. So as we enter Shavuos, let's try potentially. I'm a nobody, but let's just try to get to a place in our minds of like, what is our relationship to Torah, and more importantly than that, why is it that way? Maybe just go into Shavuos and ask the why. Like, why am I not doing these things? And why am I not able to hold on to this? And am I good where I am? Or why am I not able to take that next leap? If I were to draw what I want to do between this Shavuos and the next Shavuos, I'll tell you a win for me, and then we'll start. A win for me is I've got 6 or 7 more Sfarim that I'm actively involved with and taking notes in and learning that I can bring to the shul, and everyone can then see that I'm a guy who learns. So that's a win for me, that my ego will be fully blessed by the fact that I will be able to go to shul and I'll have 10 Sfarim and I can make sure everyone sees that so I get more Derech Eretz. But on a serious note, it's something where I've got that many more Sfarim that I'm in depth trying to understand Torah with. And that's better than last year. It's better than the 3 and a lot of the English printouts that I had, which I'll still have 100%. But it's getting better as far as like my Havana, my ability to read the Hebrew, my ability to translate it, thanks to my handy dandy Aramaic Hebrew, and the dictionary, and even better on Apple, finding this awesome keyboard thing where I can just really tell the Hebrew and it gives it to me right away. Anyways, wishing you all a beautiful Yom Tov. Let's jump in for a few minutes. Okay, so we're about to talk about Gemara. We're about to talk about the importance of Gemara and how it's relevant to this path of a Baal Tshuva. Before he lays out anything in the book in its entirety, the meat of the conversation has been what it means to be a Baal Tshuva, what it means to connect, what it means to be a soldier of God, what it means to be in a position of real connection, and what are the things that we need to do. And we spent a lot of time talking about halacha l'maisa, that we can't possibly be connected to our higher power if we decide that we're going to artificially create the way in which we do that. There's rules, and the rules are for our benefit. Let's not even use the word rules. There's lifestyle guidelines that God created so we don't veer off to one way and we can't find our way back. There is intentional, Hashem gave us a layup. I'm giving you a layup every day in 100 different ways for you to connect to me. You can decide how to use them, but they're there for you. Not, I have to wash, and then I have to bench. I mean, how many times have we said, like, I'm not washing, because I don't want to bench, and then eat bread anyways. But and then not washing, and then we have to bench, and then just ditching like an effort of being able to be, machshav the Eibishter during tefillah, during a benching. So he's going to talk about the next step of that evolution. So we've gotten the halacha piece, and now he's going to hit on a topic that is very universal to Klal Yisrael in 2026, which is the mass migration to Gemara being a pinnacle of our religion and our practice. Okay, page 59, entrance into the world of Torah is, on the one hand, entrance into the world of action. What must I do and what is forbidden to me? That is true. But another part of the world, which he has entered, which is often unclear at the beginning of the path, and is also often unclear in the middle of the way, and even sometimes until the end, is that he has entered a world that builds the power of thought in a person. So just let that resonate. That he has entered a world that builds the power of thought. Holy thought. Because remember, and I stand by this, that the unconscious thinking mind does not usually have our best interest. The conscious thinking mind imbibed with Torah can just illuminate our world in ways that we can't even imagine. It is clear that the entrance to the world means building something new in the brain. This is similar to building a new home. Everyone upon entering the world of Torah, whether he is a young child growing up or someone who has led a superficial existence and then enters into it, must understand one principle. I like that word, superficial existence. It hits me very, very, very hard, because so many people want to feel a non-superficial existence, but they have, me included, at times a very difficult time trying to feel very, very official. On the one hand, we must build up our active fulfillment of the laws, what is permitted, what is forbidden, what we are obligated to do. On the other hand, he is building a new home. In the words of the pasuk, through wisdom is a house built. In a deep sense, building the mind of a person is like building a home inside of him. Bilvavi, Mishkan, Evneh. To build a brain means that a person understands first of all that the business of Torah is not only to learn in order to do, although it is the main thing. In addition, however, he understands that he learns in order to build his intellect. Intellect. What if we thought about learning the hard things, the things that don't speak, as it's going to really build our intellect, which of course will allow us to connect in a much deeper way than just using emotion. We use emotion, we use feeling, we use inspiration. But what if you were able to combine both? That's wicked. It's completely, someone who has IQ and EQ at a high level, al pi derech haTorah, that could be wicked. Okay. Studying Gemara, building closest to Hashem by learning to think like him, kaviyachol. There are those who take Gemara and think it's a book of good luck charms. I have never thought of it that way, but I'm sure there are those that do. They have been told that it is something holy. It lights up the soul. Again, never really felt that. I'm not saying that it does not bring light to the soul. Baruch Hashem, it creates a lot of light. But if they find that there is less light than they were hoping for, they will take a Zohar, which creates more light. Yep. Everything creates light. It's an incredible thing. But does a person really learn Gemara only because it makes lights for him? The main reason he learns Gemara is that he should have a brain. The Holy Torah is certainly a Torah of light, and it lights up for a person. Yet the light of Torah is a structured, organized light. It is the enlightenment of the mind. So we have enlightenment of the soul, aka the Zohar, aka Kabbalah, aka Pnimiyas HaTorah. And the R of the Mayach, the brain light, the light of the brain, is Gemara. And I think we can all agree that guys who know how to learn Gemara, that we all know, they're usually really sharp. They have an enlightened brain. That is just what they have. Especially what we see coming out of yeshivas today, as well as what we see with some of the old school balabatim, and even the new school ones building up, but the old school ones. Someone who has never studied Gemara lacks an organized method of thinking, which again, I've never thought of it that way. I've looked at it as chaotic thinking when I learned Gemara. When he is fortunate enough to begin studying Talmud, he suddenly discovers an organized way of thinking. There's a certain amount of discomfort at first. It's hard to understand what's going on. There's the stira that I just mentioned. What difference does every detail make? Why must we discuss every nitty-gritty point so much? To avoid this confusion, we must be aware of one basic premise. Learning Gemara is not the same as learning halacha. Halacha teaches a person what he should do. When one learns Gemara, however, he can spend the whole morning studying. He will get something practical out of it, something he can, will he get something practical out of it, something he can act upon? Usually not. It is actually forbidden to go ahead and do something one learns about in the Gemara. We need to investigate what's actually written in Shulchan Aruch. It could be that there are many details that were relevant to the subject that lead to a different conclusion than the one may understand from the text of the Gemara. So he makes a very, very, very clear statement here on it's mamish not even to learn if you're going to say to me, I have to learn how Gemara, then let me at least pull something out of it every time I learn. I wasn't even getting that. Okay, so he's establishing, you're right, you're not going to get that. And not only that, you're not even supposed to do that. That's not what it's here for. It's not here to give you takeaways immediately without using other sources that Torah provides. A person arrives at the Beis Medrash in the morning with Hashem's healthy merits learning Gemara. What should he hope to achieve? First of all, knowing the Holy Torah is an end of itself, but in addition to that, and much deeper, he must build his intellect. Okay, so Bilvavi is saying, Rabbi Tamar is saying, that the job of Gemara today, the job of Gemara for us is to build the enlightenment of the brain. That's what he's saying we have to do. I can live with that. There is a divine wisdom the Creator revealed in the Holy Torah. We want to receive, so to speak, the Creator's way of thinking. Knowing what to do and what not to do is enough. Imagine a married couple where the wife says one thing and the husband says the exact opposite. I know that too well. Each of them has a totally different way of thinking. Finally, the wife gives in. That I also have never seen. Quoting the Chazal, a kosher woman does the will of her husband. I think we can just end the shir here. He says to her, okay, do whatever I want, but I cannot live together all the time with someone who always thinks the opposite way. Man, this is what? See, this is the problem. This is what I'm going to take out of tonight. I'm going to take out none of the Gemara, and I'm only going to take this out, and I'm going to go try to repeat it to my wife, and it's not going to go well. In the words of Chazal, the understanding of those who have never learned Torah is the opposite of the understanding of the wise ones who study Torah. It makes no sense that a person wants to be close to the Creator. He wants to return to Him, and the Creator, so to speak, has a way of thinking while he takes a position that is diametrically opposed. The Minister of Defense has a certain way of thinking. He may fire the general. Why? It's not good that he's no good. The problem is that his way of thinking is totally different. A person wants to be close to the Creator. He has returned to Him. He wants to cling to Him. He must, so to speak, harmonize himself with the Creator. How can he do that? One way is to think like the Creator thinks, so to speak. How do I know how the Creator thinks? Am I a prophet? Does the divine spirit rest upon me? How can I possibly know how the Eibusher thinks? Hashem gave man the Holy Torah, and within it He revealed His thoughts. When a person reads the Gemara, he discusses the Gemara's question. Without reading further, he thinks of an answer. If he thought of the correct answer on his own, it's a sign that he's already beginning to think like the way the Creator thinks. What can this be compared to? A person was walking in the forest and got lost. He didn't know how to get out of the forest in the direction of the city. He met someone else in the forest who was deaf and mute and seemed to know where he was going. At first, the poor fellow didn't notice the other man's deafness. He asked him, how do you get to the city? The deaf man couldn't hear what he was being spoken to. Slowly, he noticed the man's lips moving. He looked at him, but he couldn't answer him. The lost individual stood there and debated with himself. How do I know that this is the way? He's not talking. After a minute, he thought to himself, he's not talking, but if he himself is going that direction, it's a sign that that must be the way to get out of the forest. If I discover that Gemara says something similar to what I thought, that means I'm going in the right direction. And that's why the geschmack of finding a chiddush and really being able to understand the few times in my life that Avishai Lev has been able to consume Gemara in a way that allowed me to very much digest it and know it. And when I went back and learned to explain it, and that for me is always the answer. Can Avishai say the Shakal Levatari of the Gemara? Now, I don't even think I need to say the Shakal Levatari of Baal Peh, but can I go through the Gemara and say Shakal Levatari? If I get the Shakal, I don't really understand it, and I can probably count on one hand how many Shakal Levataris I know. And obviously there are guys at 40 years old that have been in yeshivas and are learning that can do 100 of them, and I'm envious. But it's never too late. All right. If I discover that the Gemara says something similar to what I thought, that means I'm going in the right direction. To build the right thinking in Torah means that a person learns. That is, a person learns, he tries to see little by little whether he thinks like the Gemara. So that's the beginning of the enlightenment of the Meichen, is that we get ourselves into a habit of learning how to think. And we all credit the success of Yidden. Why? Because of their ability to answer a question with a question. The ability for the neshama of a Yid to always want to progress further into understanding. So very much getting to the why of things, which is what we've been searching in our souls, it's the same thing in the brain. That's not to say that when he reads the answer and says, that's what I thought, he studies the text. He reads a question in Rashi, for example, on Chumash or in the Gemara. He tries to think of an answer. What kind of answer does he come up with? Do we even try to think of an answer? If I have to think of an answer versus giving it to me, I'm already giving up. That's how crazy this is and how distracted we are. What kind of answer does he come up with? In the beginning, I assure you, he may suggest many different possibilities, but he will definitely not suggest Rashi's. There's no need to despair. This is the path. Slowly but surely, you match yourself to the Torah's way of thinking. Gradually, you will see, one time you will merit reaching the same conclusion as the Gemara. You will merit getting the same answer as Tosfos. Eventually, you will notice that your thinking is growing closer and closer to the Holy Torah. It's no longer your own way of thinking, but the Creator's way of thinking, so to speak. Fire. So, my avoda is to continue chipping away at this Gemara, but I'm going into it to really almost like a coaching exercise. Right or wrong? It's not Lishma. It's completely for my own benefit. But I'm going into the Gemara where I'm starting to try to read it as a guidebook on how to adopt that way of thinking, because ultimately I'm doing all of these things to try to get as close as I can to the realization and actualization of having a creator who's active in my day-to-day, who's involved with me and watching over my family, and that I can go to. You can't really go into a room and build a relationship with someone if you're constantly striking out on the conversation points. I mean, how many people do we know in our lives that know the exact wrong thing to say and say it constantly? I mean, we see it all over. They just can't read the room. This is, in a way, trying to read the room. And it's almost like you can learn all the Torah in the world, but deep down, if I'm being honest with myself, Mishnayos and Gemara and that whole way of thinking, it's like you're really not going to be able to get to that place without really having those tools, because you can have it up here, but you're not going to have it here. I'm learning that both have to have